Hey, Nathan here. Welcome to the first DirectX tutorial. And in this tutorial, we are going to create the main window that our program or game will use, and our message loop, and how our game will work with the way that the Windows API works. So we will not be doing any DirectX specific stuff, but this is just to get us ready for creating a window and handling messages based on the window and getting all the groundwork set up. Alright, so let's open up Visual Studio and let's go to New Project, and it's going to be a Visual C++ and an empty project. Now I'm going to create a new folder here. I think I have a DirectX 1 basic window, but I'm going to call this one Tutorial 1 Main Window. Alright, I'm going to select that folder. So that's where I'm going to save this project. Now I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to name it, let's name it Win32 Window. Alright, I'm going to create a directory. It's going to be an empty project, Visual C++. It's saving in the right spot. I'm going to click OK. So that's an empty project. Now what I'm going to do is right click the source files, and I'm going to go to add new item. It's going to be a C++ file, and I'm going to call it main. Okay, so that will give us a blank file to work with, and we're going to put all of our Windows API and everything we need to generate the window in this file here. Alright, so we're going to use the Windows API, so we need to include windows.h. And that's going to give us a way to create a window and to handle messages. Alright. Next thing we need to do is let's create some prototypes of functions. And this will give us a way to generically generate a window. And I've set these up to make things a little bit easier, and it's going to be overloaded. I'm going to generate two functions. So let's set those up. It's going to be a Boolean. It'll return true or false if it was successful or not. Generate window. So we're going to set up some properties here, or prototypes here. HInstance. This is the handle to the current instance of the application. We'll get this from the main function. So HInstance is what we call the parameter name. Int ncmd show. That determines how the window will be displayed. Again, we get that information from the main function. LPC string str class name. The window requires a class name, and we'll pass that to this function here. LPC string str window title. Whatever we want to name our window is what we will pass it here. Int width, how wide we want the window. Int height, how tall we want the window. Alright, so that's one prototype. I'm going to copy the whole thing, and I'm going to paste it below. I'm going to add two more parameters here. Right before int width, I'm going to add an int x, comma, int y. That will allow us to pass it where we want the window to show in the x and y direction of the person's monitor, of their primary display. Alright, so those are two generic window functions. So that way, if you just need to change something with one of these functions, that will work. Alright, now we need to set up the prototype for the window procedure, and that will be what handles the messages sent to the window. So that is a L result and it is a callback window proc. That's usually the name people give it. Our handle to our window, HWND. The message is a uint. The W param and the L param. Now these W param and L param just provide more information based on the message that was sent to the function. You know, any additional information that that message might require. So all this is what we need to do to handle messages. You know, do we paint or do we close a window? That's what we'll need to use this function for. Alright, now here is the main function. It is called WinMain. And this is to set up a window and enter a message loop. Okay. Int, it's going to be WinAPI WinMain. Now, those of you that are knowledgeable in C++ or any programming, any program you make has to have an entry point. This is the main function, typically. Now, the WinMain function is for the Windows API. That is automatically called by Windows. So it automatically fills in gives us the parameters. We just need to code it here. So it automatically gives us all these. It fills up these values for us. So each instance is the current instance of our application, and each previous instance is the previous instance of the application. This parameter will always be null. That will always be null, this parameter here. lpcstr, the command line of our application, minus the application name, and then int ncmd show how the window is to be displayed. So that will be called automatically, so we do not have to worry about what these values are. It'll automatically be called. So the first thing I'm going to do is if generate window. Now I want it to be, this is your game, you can do this however you want, but for me I want this to be 1280 by 720. The 720 resolution, HD 720 resolution. And I want it to be displayed in the center of the screen. That is why I set up two generate window functions here. I'm not going to pass the X and the Y. This function will automatically center it to the screen, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. So we call it generate window, and what does it require? H instance. We get that from our WinMain. It's a parameter in WinMain. ncmd show, we need that as well. The class name, that you can say whatever you want, Win32 Window. I'm just going to do that based on the name we gave to the project. And then the window title, your first Win32 window. Alright, now I'm going to make this 1280 by 720. Nope. Closing parentheses, and this is an if, so we have opening and closing curly brackets like that. And then after the if statement, we have return 0. Alright, so if generate window, if our window was successful, we need to enter the message loop. MSG. So this will determine what message we receive and how to work on the message. So since this is a video game that we're making, it's a good idea to wrap this in a while true, because we'll always need to, update and draw while the game is running. If it's not running, obviously the whole thing will quit. That's what we will handle when the message is a quit message. So while true, you can modify this by having a global variable, say while game is running, and you might have a menu that we'll set up later on that you click that menu and the game will no longer be running, and then you just quit the game. But for now, we'll just set it to while true. Inside while true, we'll need to have another while loop. And this, how do we receive a message sent to the window? Did we click the X at the top right? Did we click this X here, right here? That is a command sent to this window from Windows, the operating system. It's sent to this window to process. How do we get that information? There is a function, there are two functions actually, but we will be using one function called peak message. And we're using this function because this one will not wait for input. We need to pass it the MSG here. So we need to provide the ampersand. We do not need to pass it the handle to the window, so just say null here. It's going to be message filter 0, message filter max 0, and then the remove message, we're going to do peak message underscore remove. Closing parentheses and opening and closing brackets here. So while peak message, if it's successful, we need to translate the message. And we need to translate it by passing in the message again. So we need the ampersand, MSG. And then we need to dispatch. After we translate it, we need to dispatch. Ampersand, MSG. Alright, so translate message. That just simply translates virtual key messages into character messages. And then dispatch message, that's pretty self-explanatory. It just dispatches it to the window procedure here that we will set up later. Okay, so we have this while loop. And while we have the message, it'll handle the messages by sending it to the window proc that we set up there. If the message we received is msg.message, if that is wm underscore quit, so the message we received is a quit message, we will break out of this while loop. Otherwise, we will update and draw our game. So Windows handles the message no matter what the message is. If we click this X, it'll close the window. That's a message sent by the operating system. If it's not a quit, once it's done processing, if it's not a quit, we need to update and draw our game. Alright, once this outer while loop is done, we need to return msg.wparam. We need to return the parameter. And then we return 0 in the WinMain. Alright, so that's the WinMain, where we will handle our messages by using peak message. Now the other one is called get message. We are not using that one because that one will wait for a message to be received. Peak message will not wait for a message to be received. And then like I said before, right now we'll set this up to be while true. You might, in a future game that you make, you might want to set it up to be a global variable so that the game is running. So you could probably set up a global variable is game running, and while is game running, you perform this. Alright, now let's worry about actually creating the windows, and we'll use the generate window function that we set up top. So bool generate window. Alright, let's go ahead and set this up right here. H instance, I only need one of those. H instance int ncmd show lpcstr for the class name, lpcstr for the window title, width and height. So we're going to set up the first one here. The first one is going to call the second one, and will give us the x and the y programmatically. It'll determine the center point of our primary display. Return generate window. We'll call the second function. H instance ncmd show class name window title. Now, how do we get the dimensions of our primary display? That is a function called get system metrics. And get system metrics requires a index, int n index. So system metrics sm underscore cx screen. This allows us to get the x dimensions of our primary display. And I don't want to scream, I want to screen. There we go. Okay, so sm underscore cx screen, that will give us the x dimensions of our primary display. And then we minus the width we want the monitor, or we want the window to be. And then we divide all this by 2, so we can get it at the center point. Now we need to do the same thing for y. Get system metrics sm underscore cy screen minus height divided by 2, comma width, comma height. So the get system metrics allows us to get the horizontal and vertical dimensions of our primary display. To get the horizontal, we pass it sm underscore cx screen, and then to get the vertical, we pass in sm underscore cy screen. To get the center point, we subtract the width, and then divide by 2, and we subtract the height and divide by 2. Alright, so that's the first generate window function. Now we need to work on the second one. This one is going to be more complex. So generate window, h instance int ncmd show lpcstr class name, lpcstr window title, int x, int y, int width, int height. So this is the one that will actually do the work of generating the window. So we need a handle to the window, hwnd, and we're going to be using the window class EX. We're going to set up some things that the Windows class EX will require, more additional properties and things like that. You might notice that some other people use the standard Win class instead of class X, but that's what we'll be using in this series. WND class EX WCEX. Okay, now let's go ahead and zero out that memory block. We need an ampersand WCEX size of WND class EX. So we're just going to zero out the WCEX memory. Now, WCEX.CB size, we're going to set that to the size of WCEX. WCEX.style, that's going to be CS underscore H redraw and CS underscore V redraw. So this style just tells us to redraw the window in any horizontal or vertical size adjustment of the client area. Now let's go ahead and set up the window procedure, window proc that we set up, WCEX. This is what we'll actually be using to handle the messages. So WCEX.LP FN WND PROC is equal to window proc. So just the function name that we're going to use. All right, now we need to store the reference at the H instance. WCEX.HInstance is equal to H instance. All right, now the icon and cursor that we want to use, and this is up to you if you want to make things fancy. I'm just going to use the default. WCEX.HIcon is equal to load icon. We need to load the icon. Null, we don't need to pass in the H instance here. It's going to be a IDI underscore, it's just going to be basic application icon. No need to make anything fancy as of right now. And now the cursor we will use. WCEX.HCursor is equal to load cursor. We do not need to pass in the H instance again. It's going to be ID cursor. And just a standard arrow cursor. No need to make anything fancy for right now. And the background color, WCEX.HBR background. And that needs a brush. HBR is HBrush. HBRUSH. So we're going to cast the color underscore window to an HBrush, and then that's what we'll be using for our color. We will change it in DirectX, so that doesn't really need to be anything fancy. Now the class name, WCEX.LPSZ class name, is equal to class name. That's what we passed in here, the Win32 window here. Now finally, WCEX.HIcon small is equal to load icon. Null again, IDI underscore win logo. Alright, so once we get all this data set up, we need to register the class EX. If it has failed, we need to return false. So if not register class EX, we're using the EX here, ampersand WCEX. close, close, opening, closing curly brackets. Inside, we return false. So if the registration failed, we return false because we cannot create the window. All right, once that's done, let's go ahead and create the window. HWND is equal to create window EX null. We don't need a EX style here. Class name again. The window name, which is the window title we set up. It's going to be an overlapping window, so WS, it's going to be we pass the style for overlapping, WS underscore overlapped window. It's going to be overlapped window. The X, the Y, the width, the height. It's not going to have a parent. It's not going to have a menu. It's going to have an H instance. And it's not going to have an L param. Alright, once that's set up, we show the window. By passing the handle to the window and the CMD show how it is to be displayed. And once all that's done, we return true. Alright, last up, we need to generate the callback, or the window proc that was set up, window procedure. Window proc handles input sent to the window. So it's gonna be L result call back window proc handle to our window, our message, W param, L param. Okay, so what we can do here is set up a switch statement for the message. It is a uint, so we can use a switch statement here. So a message, now, there's lots of things you can do here. Right now we're going to set up if we receive a WM underscore destroy, that means we want to quit our game. If we receive WM destroy, we need to post quit message and exit code 0. So we've successfully quit our program and return 0. Once that's done, we just break out of this one in case we have more later on. Now, if we did not get that message, how is the window going to process anything else that we did not set up? Well, the Windows API gives us a default window procedure that we can call to process anything that we did not process ourselves. So we need to process our default, our painting, repainting the window, and any other messages that we did not process here. Remember, we are processing the WM underscore destroy. But anything else, we want that to be handled by the default window procedure. That's def window proc. We pass the HWND message W param and L param. Alright, let's press F5 and let's see it run if we have failed. Alright, so I accidentally added an LPC str in the WinMain parameter list. Delete that C, so it's just LPSTR. I apologize for that. All these were LPC str, so it was pretty easy to accidentally do that. So now if we press F5, we do have a window, and look at the title, your first Win32 window. We move it around. That's a process handled by the OS to determine the X and Y where it's going to be displayed. And that's using the default window procedure. So if we didn't do that, if we just did something like that, it obviously won't like anything we do, because I just did that, and then it's just going to complain. So we obviously need that to do our work. So if we open up Task Manager and close our window here. So now that we close that process, we can bring that back, and that's obviously needed because it didn't display properly, it didn't process that redrawing and all that stuff. So that's what happens when you do not process all the messages. That's why they gave us that default window proc that we can do. So the only difference between WND class and WND class EX is setting the size and a small icon. Now you probably want that when you get into your own game and release your own game. You'd want a small icon and a large icon, of course. But for now, these are just the default. So we'll just use the class EX, and there's really no reason not to use it. And of course, the size, we're just setting that to be the size of WCEX. Alright, is there anything else to discuss here? We set up the class name. I discussed how to get to the dimensions of your primary display. That's how you can see it's centered here. So that's centered because we get this as the maximum. I'm running a full HD monitor, so it's 1920 by 1080. So 1920 wide by 1080. I subtract the width I want the window to be, and then the height of the window to be, and then divide those by 2 to get the center point. We discussed the translate and dispatch messages. Translates from a virtual key to a regular character message, and then dispatching it will send it. This will send it to the window proc here. Peak message versus get message. Peak message just does not wait for a message, while get to message will wait. Generate window, that's what we created ourselves. That's to handle various function calls, so we can center it if we do not pass an X and Y. Or if we do pass an X and Y, it'll go to this one, and that returns true or false depending on if it's successful or not. That should be about it. WinMain, it needs a H instance, which is the current instance of our application. Previous instance, that will always be null. An LP string, not an LPC string, but an LP string, is the command line minus the program name, and then how the window will be displayed, which is NCMD show. And then the actual window proc function, we need to switch the message and whatever we want to handle ourselves, go in here, leave everything else up to Windows by calling the default window proc. So that's about it. It's kind of messy, but once you understand a lot of things, it doesn't really look that bad. Now, if somebody were to show you this code and you didn't know anything about C++, you would think that's ridiculous. How can that much code be responsible for just creating a basic window? But it actually makes a lot of sense when you look at it. You know, we need to set the style, and then we need to set all these class names and instances, and we need to set how it will draw. The background color is the color we set up. The icons they need to be displayed. So this is going to be our base code for anything we do from this point on. We'll put our update and draw, and then we will put our DirectX stuff somewhere in here. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Next tutorial, we will actually initialize DirectX and get started with that. So I hope to see you next time.